The miracle of the law of cause and effect. The mistake between spirituality and superstition. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. The entire world, both the external world and the inner mind, is an endless ocean of conditioned phenomena in operation, a concept known as dependent origination. Within dependent origination, the law of cause and effect is at work. This is the essence of Buddhism. It is not something that everyone understands immediately. The distinction between spirituality and superstition is a very fine line that marks the level of inner maturity in real life. Because of this, many people misunderstand and fall into unfortunate circumstances in life. Most people tend to fall into one of two extremes. The first extreme is the belief that there is nothing beyond the physical operation of matter and our bodies. The world is merely atoms and molecules in motion. Thoughts or spirit are just byproducts of our physical bodies. These are people who believe that there is nothing beyond the phenomena perceived by our senses. A person is born with a physical body, grows up, thoughts appear in the brain, emotions like joy, sorrow, love, and anger develop as one matures. Thoughts become systems of beliefs and ideologies. When we die, the brain decays, and that's the end. Nothing remains. The surrounding world, including the sky, stars, and clouds, is just atoms and molecules. There is nothing behind it, just mechanical motion. Most people, both Eastern and Western, think this way. This is not necessarily bad, as their conscience still leans towards goodness. However, some of these people are willing to do evil because they believe that if the world is nothing but mechanically operating matter, there is nothing to fear. The world is just a static stage, and people are merely grains of sand existing by chance, nothing more. They believe that their existence is merely a coincidence of nature, due to the combination of paternal and maternal elements. They think that what we call consciousness is just a secretion of the brain, like how the liver secretes bile. When we die, it all ends. This view is known as a materialistic view. This perspective has existed for a long time in human history, even during the Buddha's time, with at least 8 schools holding such beliefs. The second extreme is the opposite perspective. This view holds that humans are weak and insignificant beings surrounded by gods, spirits, demons, ghosts, heavens, Buddhas, all constantly watching us, ready to punish us if we do wrong or reward us if we pray. This mindset believes that gods, Buddhas, demons, and ghosts are everywhere, ready to threaten humans. Everywhere we go, we must be cautious and fearful. This extreme believes that our fate is like a ball tossed around by the invisible but ever-present forces of deities. This is the extreme of superstition. This tendency is very common in Asia, such as in Myanmar, China, India, and even Vietnam. The natural consequence of this tendency is that people always seek blessings, hoping to fulfill their desires. When they take exams, they pray to gods of examinations. When they aspire to be officials, they pray to deities to help them advance in their careers. They pray for safety and health, hoping to avoid accidents and enjoy peace. These are people who come to the gods and deities with their own interests and happiness in mind. They think that praying frequently, making offerings everywhere, and seeking rewards from unknown forces is spirituality. Unfortunately, this tendency is widespread in Vietnam. These two extreme tendencies, one where nothing is believed and evil is easily committed, and the other where everything is feared and blindly believed, likely dominate human psychology, especially in Vietnam. Over the past decade, we've seen a 180-degree shift in the behavior of those who previously held no beliefs. They have now swung to the other extreme, believing and worshiping everything, leading to unusual phenomena such as competing in prayer, offering sacrifices, stuffing money into the hands and mouths of statues, and burning paper money everywhere. Unfortunately, these practices are spreading widely in society. We mention these matters not to attack anyone's religious beliefs, but to present, from our own experience, what the spiritual path truly is and how to walk the middle way between these two extremes. The middle way here does not mean compromise, taking a bit from each side, but rather it is the path that the Buddha taught. If we walk the right path, we will become liberated beings. These two extremes are merely erroneous views. What does it mean to have faith in the law of cause and effect? It means believing that whatever we do will have consequences in the future. It means believing that whatever happens to us, no matter how small, has a cause from the past. Believing in cause and effect is believing that every event that happens now must have had a cause before and will result in an outcome later. At first, believing in cause and effect may seem simple. For example, I strike a bell, and the bell rings. I strike a match and it ignites. I drink alcohol and I get a headache. I hit someone and they dislike me. I work hard and acquire skills and I get a good job. I lend someone $1 million and the next day they have to repay me $1 million. All of these are cause and effect, but the examples I listed are only the mechanical aspects of cause and effect. I will call these the external aspects of cause and effect. What is the external aspect? The external aspect is what we can see, reason out, and understand through logic. But the workings of the world are not just on the external side. They also have an internal aspect. What do we mean by external and internal aspects? The external aspect is what is visible to us, while the internal aspect is what is hidden from view. The external side is just a small part, like the tip of an iceberg above water that we can see, while the majority of the iceberg lies beneath the surface, hidden from sight. That is the internal aspect. Therefore, to believe in cause and effect is to believe that beyond the visible, logical side, there is also an invisible, underlying side. The internal aspect is the hidden, vast, and crucial part of cause and effect. Most people understand cause and effect but do not see the internal aspect. Science can only demonstrate the external aspect. It cannot explain the internal aspect of cause and effect. If I owe you $1 million and repay it the next day, that is the external aspect. But if I owe you $1 million and don't repay it, and 10 years later something completely unrelated happens where I lose 15 million dong, I might think it was just a coincidence, but it was actually the working of the internal aspect. The paths of the internal aspect are invisible to us. When they manifest, we think they are random. If I help my child study and they pass an exam, that is the external aspect. But if I help someone else's child and then 10 years later a complete stranger helps my child with their career, that is the internal aspect. It seems unrelated, but it is connected because we cannot see the internal aspect, so we don't believe it exists. People are like that. If they don't see it, they don't believe it. We only see the external side, but the paths of the internal aspect, hidden from us, exist. When we begin to believe in these hidden paths, we start to understand life and realize that things operate in mysterious, miraculous ways. We then understand that the issue is not so simple. There are paths in the internal aspect, which is why our ancestors often spoke of hidden virtues. What is hidden virtue? Hidden virtue is the virtue that operates within the hidden paths, the invisible paths. Hidden virtue means that cause and effect operate in the hidden paths, and these paths are miraculous. We can never fully see them, no matter how wise we are. Even the great sages of Buddhism may not fully perceive them. Even the Buddha said that cause and effect are beyond comprehension. We cannot fully understand the mechanisms of cause and effect. We should simply believe that the operation of cause and effect has both an external and an internal aspect, and it is the internal aspect that is the most important. Therefore, you should understand that everything we do has its operation, and everything we endure today has an underlying cause. Everything that happens today has a cause before it, though we may not fully understand it. For example, if I drink too much alcohol today and have a headache tomorrow, I might not realize why I'm the only one with a headache, thinking I'm just unlucky. Similarly, living in this world, enduring much suffering, misfortune, and illness, one might complain, "Why is my life so miserable?" But if one believes in past lives, one might wonder, could it be that the causes of today's suffering were planted in a past life? It's like remembering that today's headache is because of yesterday's drinking. When one realizes this, one won't complain or blame anyone, but will instead acknowledge the cause and refrain from drinking so much in the future. If we understand that the internal aspect is hidden and accept the hypothesis of a past life and future life, then many things in life become clearer and more understandable. Therefore, believing in cause and effect means believing that there is an operation in the internal aspect and that there are multiple lives interconnected with each other. Additionally, believing in cause and effect means believing that we operate on three levels: body, speech, and mind. The body refers to our physical actions, speech refers to our words, and the mind refers to our thoughts. When we say we believe in cause and effect, we mean that every action has its consequences. In ordinary life, people tend to pay attention only to physical actions, while words and thoughts are often neglected. For example, if someone uses a knife to kill another person, they will be sentenced by the court. But if someone merely uses words or thoughts, making threats or planning to kill, the court will not convict them. However, from a spiritual perspective, cause and effect operate on all three levels: body, speech, and mind. This means that merely intending to kill someone or verbally threatening to kill someone initiates the chain of cause and effect. The mind begins to operate within the internal aspect. This is why the Buddha advises us to guard our thoughts. Therefore, we should guard our body, speech, and mind to cultivate good karma, so that in this life or the next, or even our descendants, may enjoy peace and happiness. If you believe in it, you might even believe that your ancestors, those who have passed away, can find peace as well. The miraculous power of the mind is beyond imagination. The effects of the mind are immense. We cannot comprehend them with logic. Is there a judge sitting somewhere, waiting for us to do wrong so that they can record our misdeeds and punish or reward us later? No, there is no one recording anything. There is no Lord of the Dead writing it all down. We need to understand how cause and effect operate. According to us, every action we take, whether physical, verbal, or mental, leaves an imprint on our mind as soon as it occurs. This imprint corresponds to the external action. In physics, when a force is applied outward, an equal and opposite reaction force goes inward, and both forces are equal. The barrel of a gun recoils when a bullet is fired. The recoil force is equal to the force of the bullet. If I stand on a platform and jump to the other side, my body moves forward, but my foot pushes against the platform, which absorbs the push. Similarly, when we intend to curse or kill someone, an imprint forms in the mind. This imprint must be resolved at some point in the future. We may not understand how the mind operates, but one thing is certain: it will attract circumstances that cause the owner of that mind to relive what they did to others. That is the miraculous nature of the mind. It operates objectively, impartially, and independently. The mind has no inside or outside, no size. It is the origin of life itself. Whatever we do, whether physical, verbal, or mental, immediately leaves an imprint on the mind. This imprint waits for the right conditions to blossom into an outcome, creating a situation where we must experience what we caused others to endure. This is why a murderer will eventually be killed and a deceiver will eventually be deceived. Because of the mind's strange activity, a murderer lives to experience being killed in return. For example, even when Venerable Moggallana, who had attained the highest spiritual powers that even the Buddha sometimes relied on, was killed, it was because he had killed someone in a past life. Similarly, Venerable Sariputta and Patriarch Huika, the second patriarch of Zen Buddhism, were also killed despite having attained enlightenment. Even the Buddha himself bled because he had harmed someone in a past life. Therefore, all of us who have done wrong to others will experience similar suffering. This is an unavoidable condition. Let me give you another example to make the point clearer. Suppose someone commits murder, but for some reason they are not prosecuted. Suppose this person, feeling deep remorse, devotes themselves to spiritual practice, helping others out of genuine remorse, giving away all their wealth to help those in need. In that case, two things will happen to them in this life or the next. First, they will experience happiness and receive help from many people because they have helped many. But the same person will still experience being killed in return. This killing could be physical or merely in a dream, depending on the severity of the harm they caused. In short, these two karmic forces will operate simultaneously. They cannot cancel each other out or be altered. You cannot say, "I've just helped many people, so forgive me," because the mind does not reconcile. Once the mind has been imprinted twice, two events must occur to resolve it. The only question is how it will be resolved. For example, the return killing might manifest as a real death or just in a dream. The mind must create a situation where it relives what it caused another, so the mind can be cleansed. Thus, the mind operates without a judge recording our actions. But with all its capacity, the mind remembers everything and operates so that every action has a corresponding reaction, attracting circumstances that make us experience what we caused others to endure. This is why life has many facets, giving us joys and sorrows, happiness and pain. Even the wealthy have their own forms of suffering. Why are some people constantly anxious while others are full of joy? Why do some suffer from illness while others are fortunate, with sudden, unexpected accidents occurring to them? All these things are the miraculous workings of the mind, creating endless variations of different lives. These outcomes do not necessarily occur in this life. Sometimes the conditions are not fully ripe in this life, so it does not happen. It waits until the next life, when all conditions are met, for similar events to occur. What does it mean for conditions to be fully ripe? For example, suppose you want to write a letter. You have the intention. But to actually write a letter for someone else to read, you need a pen, paper, and time to write it. So the intention is just an imprint in the mind, but the other conditions, the pen, paper, and time, must all be present for the letter to be completed. Similarly, for an event to occur according to the law of cause and effect, there must be the cause, which is the imprint in the mind, plus the external conditions, such as paper, ink, and time. Fearing the cause but not the effect. What does it mean to fear the cause? Fearing the cause means being afraid of creating bad karma. Before taking any action, we should ask whether it will cause bad karma in terms of body, speech, or mind. If we refrain from harming others, we avoid bad karma in terms of the body. If we refrain from using harsh words or causing discord, we avoid bad karma in terms of speech. Even our thoughts should be free from evil. If an evil thought arises, we should recognize it early and prevent it from influencing our speech and actions. Not fearing the effect is the mature attitude of a spiritual person. We understand that if something happens, it has a prior cause, not just random chance. So when it happens, we calmly accept it, knowing that even though it may be regrettable or something we would have avoided, it has already occurred. We believe there is a cause, and it is one we created in the past. We do not fear the effect. If it has come, let it come. In fact, those who have advanced on the spiritual path may even wish for the effect to come sooner. Better for it to come in this life than in the next, when we may not have the strength to face it. Right now we have the strength, resources, health, and willpower, so let it come so we can settle this karma now. This does not mean we passively endure suffering when illness or accidents occur. Usually such events happen unexpectedly, and we might complain, "Why am I the only one suffering?" But deep in our hearts, we should feel remorse. If I have wronged someone, I sincerely repent. At the same time, the person should also seek medical treatment, use all available means to reduce their pain and minimize suffering. In other words, we do not passively accept suffering. We actively find ways in this life to mitigate the hardship. This is what it means to fear the cause but not the effect. Another important point is that we need to approach cause and effect with understanding and respect. When faced with an event, whether it happens to us or someone else, we cannot always discern whether it is a cause or an effect. We can only see it as one link in the endless chain of life. We can carefully examine our own cause and effect, but we should not hastily speculate or judge the cause and effect of others. The simple reason is that we cannot use logic to understand things that are beyond logic. Only the Buddha or rare enlightened beings can truly understand the lives of sentient beings, but they never speak of it. As Lao Tzu said, "Those who know do not speak, those who speak do not know." To fully grasp cause and effect is to see that everything is interconnected in an infinite sea of dependent origination. What is dependent origination? Dependent origination is the Buddhist concept that everything is interconnected. When speaking of dependent origination, the Buddha made a statement that seems ordinary, even simple-minded, yet nothing is deeper than this. This statement is the formula of the universe. This is because that is. This arises because that arises. This ceases because that ceases. In other words, everything is interconnected. using each other as a basis for arising. When the conditions for arising are exhausted, they cease. For example, if I strike a match, it lights a flame. The flame arises because of the action of striking. After 5 seconds, the match burns out, the flame ceases. It sounds simple, but let me tell you, every action of the body and mind, external and internal, follows only this rule. The entire world, both the external world and the inner mind, is an endless ocean of conditioned phenomena in operation, a concept known as dependent origination. Within dependent origination, the law of cause and effect is at work. This is the essence of Buddhism. Not everyone understands this immediately, but if you don't, just listen and hold it here, you'll understand it later. Bodhisattvas fear the cause, and sentient beings fear the effect. What is it about causes that are so frightening? The saying, Bodhisattvas fear the cause and sentient beings fear the effect, is profound, but not everyone fully understands its meaning. As a result, we continue to commit many wrongful actions, causing negative outcomes. Having attained enlightenment and fully understood the law of cause and effect across the 3 times, Bodhisattvas fear only the cause and not the effect. Sentient beings, being those who are still bound by ignorance and delusion, continue to wander in the cycle of birth and death. Because they have not yet awakened, they remain ignorant and do not understand the law of cause and effect, so they fear only the effect and not the cause. Cause and effect exist independently. They continue to operate whether we believe in them or not. The inevitability of rebirth is determined by cause and effect. No one else imposes suffering or happiness on us. No external force pulls us in one direction or another. Whether we remember it or not, the wrongs we have committed will inevitably lead to consequences. This is why it is entirely possible for someone who is talented but still poor to exist. When someone excels in worldly knowledge, enjoys debating literature, but does no good deeds, does not help others, the talent they pride themselves on will not lead to wealth. In Buddhist scriptures, it is said that bodhisattvas fear the cause, and sentient beings fear the effect. Why is this? Bodhisattvas are enlightened beings who have seen the root causes of suffering and happiness. To end suffering and find joy, there is no better way than to refrain from planting the seeds of suffering and to diligently plant the seeds of happiness. Not sowing the seeds of suffering means not encountering the fruits of suffering. Continuously sowing the seeds of happiness means the fruits of happiness will inevitably come. This is the understanding and practice of the enlightened. Because they are enlightened, they clearly see what causes suffering and immediately fear it, doing everything they can to eliminate it. Seeing that greed and stinginess are causes of suffering, bodhisattvas practice generosity to eliminate them, perfecting the paramita of generosity. Seeing that carelessness and arrogance destroy virtue, bodhisattvas practice moral discipline to overcome them, perfecting the paramita of moral discipline. Seeing that anger causes many faults, bodhisattvas practice patience to suppress it, perfecting the paramita of patience. Seeing that laziness and indulgence lead to the loss of virtue, bodhisattvas practice diligence to drive them away, perfecting the paramita of diligence. Seeing that a scattered mind causes confusion and darkness, bodhisattvas practice meditation to focus the mind, perfecting the paramita of meditation. Seeing that ignorance leads to the cycle of birth and death, bodhisattvas practice wisdom to dispel it, perfecting the paramita of wisdom. Bodhisattvas practice to eliminate these 6 negative causes. Sins, ignorance, and dangers lead people endlessly into the cycle of suffering. When these 6 causes are completely eradicated, enlightenment and liberation are achieved. This is practicing the 6 paramitas, walking the path of the bodhisattva, and upon enlightenment, one truly becomes a bodhisattva. The causes we have sown cannot be changed. More than anyone, bodhisattvas know that cause and effect are clear-cut. Once a cause has been created, it cannot be altered. The truth is that even the Buddha and his 10 great disciples, despite their diligent practice, still met with tragic deaths corresponding to the bad causes they had sown in many previous lives. This is just one of the many reasons why bodhisattvas fear the causes that sentient beings may create every day in their lives. Sometimes sins pile up on sins, making it impossible to avoid the negative consequences. Therefore, bodhisattvas are even more compassionate and sorrowful for all beings as they continue to drift through the cycle of birth and death. They are cautious about the causes they are about to create. If you wish to follow the example of the Bodhisattvas, then at least by fearing the cause, you should recognize when your body, speech, or mind is about to engage in something wrong or harmful, and stop yourself from doing it. To end suffering and find joy, there is no better way than to refrain from planting the seeds of suffering and to diligently plant the seeds of happiness. Furthermore, every day, do not stop doing good deeds. Choose to do good to replace the bad causes with good causes. Why do sentient beings fear the effect? Causes in a previous life, effects in the next life. As human beings, we all fear suffering and seek happiness. This is entirely reasonable. But because our vision is limited, we continue to fall into the suffering that we ourselves have created. Sentient beings fear the effect because we only fear what we can see. This may be failure, disgrace, failed businesses, betrayal, or the loss of loved ones. Only when these things happen to us do we fear them, but these are merely the effects of the causes we sowed in previous lives. Even though we talk about cause and effect today, how many of us have truly awakened and changed? Only when the effects truly come to us do we tremble in fear, yet we continue to sow seeds of evil and unwholesome actions every day. The wise fear the cause, the foolish fear the effect. Sentient beings are those who are still deluded in mind, only focusing on the effect, always fearing the sufferings of life, but not seeking to avoid the causes of suffering. Understanding this, we realize that each of us truly has the power to determine our fate. There is no need to rely on any supernatural forces. Whether our lives are bright or dark depends entirely on the causes we have created. So instead of focusing on the effect, be more cautious with our causes. Each of us must have the courage to take responsibility for ourselves, not blaming others or feeling sorry for ourselves. Be brave in this life, but be wise in choosing good causes from now on. If we do not create good causes, we will not have good effects. If we wish to live long and healthy lives but do not save or help others, do not respect the lives of other beings, then it is impossible to achieve. Or if we wish to be wealthy, with everyone supporting us, but we do not practice generosity or help others in times of need, that wish is unreasonable. Or if we wish for our family to be joyful and happy but only speak words of division, praying for family unity without using words of advice to bring harmony, then that wish is unreasonable. Some people wish that no one would get angry with them, but they do not practice forgiveness. Some people wish for wisdom and clarity of mind, but they do not let go of stubbornness and wrong views. No amount of wishing will ever be fulfilled. Because people wish for the effect without creating the cause, this is the empty wishing of ignorant people. Dear friends, life has rules that are difficult to believe, but true. These are the laws of cause and effect and stories of retribution that seem like they could only happen in fiction or movies, but they occur in reality as a warning to all of us. Here is the story of a mother who engaged in the trade of killing animals and the tragic deaths of her entire family. For 15 years, Nguyen Thi Thu earned a living by selling and slaughtering livestock and poultry. She killed tens of thousands of chickens, ducks, rabbits, dogs, and more. During wedding seasons or around the new year, she would kill hundreds of animals each day, earning millions of dong and quickly becoming wealthy. Everyone in the village admired her. However, no one could have imagined the disaster that would soon befall her family. Her husband died unexpectedly in a tragic accident. Her eldest son was electrocuted to death the night before his wedding. A few months later, her youngest son was diagnosed with bone cancer, and he too eventually passed away after the family's wealth had been completely depleted. On the day of her son's cremation, she shaved her head and became a nun, seeking solace in the sound of the bell and the recitation of the sutras to cleanse the terrible karma she had accumulated over the years. Her family paid the price for the karma of killing animals. There was a monk named Giak Lien, the abbot of Phu Khai Pagoda in Vĩnh Long province, who often shared stories of cause and effect that he had witnessed during his years of monastic life. One of the most frequently told stories is about a boy named Hien, who lived as a beggar in Tra Vinh, with a body and appearance resembling that of a cow. Hien was born into a family with a long tradition of slaughtering cows in Travin. His grandfather had become wealthy through this trade. One day, before preparing to slaughter a pregnant cow, the grandfather had a strange dream. In the dream, a woman appeared before him, crying and begging, "Please, I beg you, do not kill me. Let me give birth to my calf, and then you can kill me." What was strange was that he had the same dream 3 times that night. He told his wife about the dream, and she advised him not to slaughter the cow, but to continue raising it until it gave birth. After much consideration, he ultimately decided to slaughter the cow for sale. The next morning, the cow's cries were more desperate and terrifying than any cow he had ever slaughtered before. It struggled so violently that it broke free from its restraints. But in the end, it was still killed. The image of that cow remained etched in the grandfather's memory, and he could never forget it. The most haunting part was that even after the cow was decapitated, its head continued to move back and forth as if it were still alive. Coincidentally, not long after the cow was killed, the grandfather's daughter-in-law gave birth to his first grandchild, his first grandson. There would be nothing noteworthy about this if the baby hadn't been born with physical deformities resembling those of a cow. He had a cleft lip, bulging eyes, crooked limbs, and he could only crawl instead of walking. His head constantly swayed back and forth. This child was Hien. When the grandfather saw his grandson, he couldn't help but remember the cow he had slaughtered, especially the way it had shaken its head. Looking at his grandson and reflecting on the past, he realized the deeper cause of why his grandson was born this way. Filled with regret, he wanted to atone for his sins. He decided to give up the trade that had been the source of his family's wealth for generations. He abandoned the practice of slaughtering cows. He also spent all his remaining wealth on treating his grandson, but the boy continued to live with his deformities. To make matters worse, when Hien was 10 years old, he lost all his remaining family members to sudden illnesses. He was left to crawl on the streets, begging for food. Every time he begged, it was as if some unseen force compelled him to crawl and cry out pitifully, "Please everyone, please don't kill me. I am the cow." This is a story about the law of cause and effect, a story of retribution that has left an indelible mark on the minds of the people of Vintlong, serving as a moral lesson on how to live and guide their lives to avoid the mistakes of those mentioned in these stories. A story of retribution for destroying a shrine and dishonoring ancestors. During a campaign to expand the movement, the authorities forced people to destroy countless antiques and temples. However, there was one small shrine and the ancestral tablets within it that no one dared to touch. But 2 young men in the village, known for their rebellious behavior, brazenly declared that they would destroy the shrine if no one else dared to do so. Eventually, the shrine was demolished, and the ancestral tablets were trampled by the 2 young men before being thrown into a river in front of the village. After the destruction, one young man returned home, while the other sat by the river, resting. The young man who returned home was suddenly struck with severe abdominal pain as soon as he arrived. He cried out in agony, rolling on the floor. His mother, a devout Buddhist, witnessed her son's sudden illness and knew his life was in danger. She sincerely knelt and crawled from her home to the recently demolished shrine, confessing on her son's behalf and pleading for forgiveness from the deities. Meanwhile, the young man, suffering from excruciating pain, realized that he was being punished for his actions. Deeply remorseful, he began to develop a deep respect for Buddhism. Miraculously, his abdominal pain gradually subsided and eventually disappeared entirely. Knowing he had been forgiven, he devoted himself to reciting sutras and praying to the Buddha day and night. However, the other young man who had sat by the river to rest was not so fortunate. After finishing his rest, he prepared to leave, but as soon as he stood up, he inexplicably fell to the ground. Struggling to get up, he discovered that his legs had twisted unnaturally, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not straighten them. His legs were stuck together, and he could not separate them. Furthermore, his back suddenly bent forward, and his head was forced down, almost touching the ground. Despite his best efforts, he could not straighten his back. On his way home, he had to use his hands to support himself on the ground as he moved. From that day on, he was forced to walk in this painful and humiliating manner for the rest of his life. His movements resembled the act of bowing and prostrating before the Buddha. The people of the village believed that this was retribution for destroying the shrine and desecrating the ancestral tablets. He had to endure this humiliating posture for the rest of his life.